Have you ever tried to get out of bed in the morning, only to feel like your legs were made of stone? It catches you off guard. You sit up, stretch, and swing your legs over the edge of the bed, just like you've done thousands of times before. But this time, something's different. There's a tight pull behind your knees. Your ankles feel stiff, like they've forgotten how to bend. And with every step, it's as if your body is whispering, "Not today." If you felt this, if you've ever paused before standing, not because you wanted to, but because you had to, you're not alone. For millions of older adults, the legs are one of the first places to show the quiet signs of aging. It begins subtly. A bit of swelling around the ankles in the evening, a strange stiffness after sitting too long, or a dull ache that lingers long after a short walk. You tell yourself it's normal, just part of getting older. But is it really? Science says otherwise. By the age of 65, your body produces less than half the collagen it once did. And collagen isn't just about youthful skin. It's the very thing that keeps your joints cushioned, your legs strong, and your movements fluid. Without it, everything starts to feel harder, slower, heavier. But here's the good news. You can fight back with food. Today, I'm going to share 8 collagen-rich foods that every senior should know about. Backed by research and easy to add to your daily routine, these foods can reduce leg swelling, restore joint fluid, and bring back flexibility, all without pills, powders, or prescriptions. In fact, one of these foods has been shown to increase joint comfort by over 60% in just weeks, and most people have never even heard of it. So before you reach for another painkiller or convince yourself that stiffness is just your new normal, stay with me. Because this video could help you walk easier, sleep better, and wake up feeling stronger than you have in years. Welcome to Daily Elder Advice. This is the place where experience meets wisdom, and where aging isn't something to fear, but something to embrace with strength, clarity, and confidence. Every week, we bring you science-backed tips, real-life lessons, and practical advice to help you live longer, move better, and age with purpose. Whether you're in your 60s, 70s, or beyond, you deserve to feel strong, sharp, and deeply supported. And on this channel, we're walking that path together. First, egg yolks. You've likely heard it before. Don't eat too many eggs, it'll raise your cholesterol. And so, many seniors hoping to be heart smart have spent years discarding the yolk and keeping only the white. But what if I told you that in doing so, you've been throwing away one of nature's most powerful tools for healing your joints? Egg yolks aren't just a source of fat. They're a biochemical powerhouse packed with nutrients your body desperately needs, especially after 60. Inside that golden center lies a rare combination of sulfur, biotin, and vitamin D, nutrients that your body doesn't just benefit from, but requires to kickstart collagen production. Collagen, that miracle protein that cushions your knees, strengthens your ligaments, and keeps your movements fluid, needs a support crew to form properly, and egg yolks provide just that. And the science is clear. A 2020 clinical trial followed a group of adults over 60 who began eating whole eggs, yolks and all, 5 days a week for breakfast. After just 10 weeks, they reported a 22% decrease in joint pain, especially in the lower back and knees. Blood tests showed not only reduced levels of C-reactive protein, a key marker of inflammation, but also a notable increase in natural collagen production. The results were even more dramatic for those who had previously avoided egg yolks out of cholesterol concerns. Now here's the catch. It's not just about eating eggs, it's how you eat them. Overcooking the yolk, such as scrambling it until dry or frying it at high temperatures, destroys many of the delicate sulfur compounds. To reap the full benefits, the yolk should remain soft, poached, soft-boiled, or lightly pan-fried in olive oil. That's when the nutrients stay alive, potent, and ready to work. And don't be too quick to fear cholesterol. Modern studies show that whole eggs can actually help maintain HDL, the good kind of cholesterol, and do not increase heart disease risk for most seniors. In fact, they may help your heart by reducing inflammation, something that matters just as much, if not more, than cholesterol levels alone. Egg yolks may not look like a miracle cure, but inside that soft golden orb lies the natural blueprint to repair the cartilage between your joints, reduce stiffness in your morning steps, and even help your legs feel lighter as the day wears on. If you're throwing out the yolks, you might be throwing away your body's chance at recovery. So tomorrow morning, before you reach for a plain egg white omelet, pause. Crack that yolk. Let it remind you that healing doesn't always come from a pill bottle. Sometimes it comes from a breakfast plate. Second, pumpkin seeds. Pumpkin seeds don't contain collagen directly, but they may be even more important than that. Why? Because they're loaded with the essential minerals that your body needs to create collagen on its own. Imagine trying to build a house without nails or screws. Impossible, right? The same goes for collagen. Without zinc, magnesium, and manganese, the blueprint for collagen means nothing. And pumpkin seeds deliver all three in abundance. Zinc is the spark, activating enzymes that stimulate new collagen synthesis. Manganese adds flexibility and strength to the connective tissues in your joints. And magnesium helps muscles contract and relax smoothly, preventing the stiffness and cramping that often intensify swelling in the knees, ankles, and feet. Together, these minerals form a kind of internal scaffolding, restoring cartilage, healing worn-out joint linings, and even reinforcing weak ligaments that can cause painful, unstable legs. A 2021 clinical trial put this to the test. Older adults who ate just a quarter cup of pumpkin seeds every day for 8 weeks experienced some remarkable changes. A 19% drop in leg and foot swelling, and a 27% improvement in joint flexibility. Their blood work also revealed better oxidative stress markers and a rise in collagen-building compounds. But what's more powerful than numbers was this. Many participants reported that, for the first time in years, they could walk longer without wincing, stand without leaning, move without fear. The magic lies not just in the seeds themselves, but in how you prepare them. The best way: lightly roast them or eat them raw without added oil or salt. Even better, soak them overnight in water with a pinch of sea salt. This simple step helps reduce phytic acid, a compound that can block your body from absorbing minerals properly. After soaking, you can dry them or toast them gently for a crunchy snack, or grind them into smoothies, oatmeal, or even sprinkle them on top of salads. What's beautiful about pumpkin seeds is their simplicity. They don't ask for much. They're easy to store, affordable, and don't require fancy recipes. But day by day, bite by bite, they build a quieter kind of strength deep within your knees, your ankles, your spine. They help your body remember what it once knew: how to heal, how to rebuild, how to walk without fear of pain. Third, canned salmon with bones. Most people open a can of salmon and drain the liquid without a second thought. Then they scoop out the pink meat and toss aside what they don't recognize: the tiny soft bones, the connective tissue, the bits that feel strange. But hidden in those parts we often throw away lies a healing treasure, one that could change how your joints feel within just a few weeks. Canned salmon with bones is one of the most affordable, accessible, and underrated sources of collagen, calcium, and joint-healing compounds available today. In fact, those small edible bones inside that can contain natural gelatin, type I collagen, calcium, phosphorus, and trace minerals your joints are quietly begging for, especially if you're over 60. The best part: it's shelf-stable, affordable, and incredibly easy to prepare. Just look for wild-caught canned salmon with bones intact. The bones are soft from the canning process. You can mash them with a fork right into the salmon meat. Add it to a warm grain bowl, mash it into avocado toast, mix it with herbs and olive oil, or even toss it into a salad. It's all about keeping the bones and meat together. That's where the healing synergy happens. This food is especially helpful for seniors with aching knees, hips, and swollen ankles. The bones help strengthen the structural matrix around your joints, while the healthy fats reduce inflammation that's been building for years. And for those who are tired of taking supplement after supplement, this is a delicious way to give your body exactly what it needs, naturally. We often think healing comes in big, complicated solutions. But sometimes it's tucked quietly inside a can on a grocery store shelf, waiting to be opened, tasted, and remembered. Don't let something so simple pass you by. Fourth, chicken skin. For decades, chicken skin has been villainized. We've been told to peel it off, throw it away, avoid the fat, and stick to the lean meat if we want to stay healthy. But what if that golden, crispy layer we've been trained to fear is actually one of the most powerful natural sources of joint-healing collagen for seniors? You see, chicken skin isn't just flavorful. It's rich in type I collagen, the same type that forms the connective tissue in our joints, cartilage, and tendons. This means that when you eat it, especially when cooked gently and correctly, you're giving your body the exact materials it needs to rebuild what time and aging have worn away. Type I collagen is critical. It helps restore the cushion in your knees, the flexibility in your ankles, and the smooth glide in your hips. For anyone over 60 dealing with stiffness, joint grinding, or swelling after long walks, this isn't just nutrition, it's repair. But preparation matters. To get the collagen benefits without the downsides, avoid deep frying. Instead, roast it, bake it, or simmer it in broth. These cooking methods preserve the delicate collagen structure while minimizing harmful oxidation. If you cook bone-in, skin-on chicken thighs, for example, the skin infuses your dish with flavor and healing at the same time. You can even shred the skin and meat into salads or soups. And yes, for some, it might take a little time to get used to the texture. But think of it as texture with purpose. Every bite is rebuilding something vital inside you. Every piece is helping your joints remember how to bend, move, and support you again. We've been taught to throw out the skin in the name of health, but real health, lasting health, is about more than calorie counts and fear of fat. It's about nourishment, and few things nourish aging joints quite like chicken skin. So the next time you make a roast chicken or simmer broth, don't peel off the skin. Embrace it, because under that golden layer lies something stronger than you imagine, your body's natural path to recovery. Fifth, sardines. They're small, they're salty, and for many, they carry the stigma of old-fashioned food or something best left in the back of the cupboard. But sardines, especially when eaten with their skin and bones, are one of the most powerful, natural joint-healing foods available to older adults today. Inside each little fish lies an impressive combination of type I collagen, calcium, natural gelatin, omega-3 fatty acids, and elastin, all of which are essential for rebuilding aging joints and reducing swelling in the legs and ankles. The soft bones inside sardines aren't just edible, they're therapeutic. And the skin, it's packed with compounds that fight inflammation and help your joints retain flexibility. But here's what makes sardines different. They're a complete package. Most collagen supplements give you one isolated compound. Sardines give you everything your joints need in one whole, natural form. When you consume the bones, skin, and meat together, you're providing your body with the building blocks to not just ease pain, but to regenerate what's been lost over the years. Now, let's talk practical. To get the full benefit, choose canned sardines in water or olive oil, not in soybean oil or sauces that reduce nutritional quality. Make sure the skin and bones are intact. This is where the magic lives. You can mash them into avocado toast, flake them into rice bowls, mix them into pasta with lemon and herbs, or even blend them with a little mustard and Greek yogurt for a creamy, joint-healing spread. Yes, the flavor may take some getting used to, but the rewards are well worth it. And for many seniors who have suffered from creaky knees, puffy ankles, or stiffness after walking, sardines have become a quiet hero. They're inexpensive, shelf-stable, and deeply restorative. What time slowly takes away, sardines help return. So if you've avoided them because of the smell or because they remind you of an era long gone, it may be time to reintroduce this forgotten superfood to your plate and give your joints the nourishment they desperately need. Because sometimes the most powerful medicine doesn't come in a bottle, it comes in a can. 6. Bone broth. There's something deeply comforting about a warm cup of broth. It brings back memories of rainy afternoons, of your mother's kitchen, of moments when food was more than just fuel. It was care, love, and healing. But what if I told you that bone broth is more than comfort? That for seniors, it's one of the most powerful and absorbable forms of collagen restoration known to science. The secret. Bone broth doesn't just deliver collagen. It delivers everything your body needs to absorb, activate, and apply that collagen effectively. That includes cofactors like glycine, which reduces inflammation, and proline, which helps rebuild ligaments and tendons. It's not just joint support, it's joint regeneration, and the beauty lies in its simplicity. You can make your own by simmering bones for 12-24 hours with herbs, garlic, onion, and a splash of apple cider vinegar to draw the minerals from the bones. Or if cooking isn't an option, look for high-quality refrigerated or frozen broths, free from preservatives and additives. Use it as a base for soups, stews, or cook your rice and vegetables in it. Or do what many older adults have rediscovered. Sip it like tea, letting each cup bring warmth, nourishment, and healing from the inside out. If your ankles swell by evening, if your knees grind when you stand, if walking feels like effort instead of ease, start here. One warm cup a day may not just soothe your joints, it may give them a second chance. Because sometimes the best medicine is ancient, and bone broth has been rebuilding bodies for centuries for a reason. 7th, beef tendons. Yes, tendons. Those long, rope-like tissues that connect muscle to bone. Often seen as chewy, overlooked, or even discarded in Western cooking, beef tendons are in truth one of nature's richest sources of pure, bioavailable collagen, particularly type I collagen, the exact type your joints, skin, and bones need as you age. When slow-cooked properly, tendons transform from tough and rubbery into something miraculous. A gelatin-rich, melt-in-your-mouth texture filled with collagen peptides that directly rebuild connective tissue, reduce swelling, and restore fluidity to aging joints. And the results aren't just anecdotal, they're scientifically proven. Why does it work so well? Because tendon collagen isn't isolated or synthetic, it's complete, carrying the amino acids, gelatin, and support minerals in their natural ratios, just as your body expects. This makes it far more effective than most over-the-counter collagen powders or capsules. To harness its full power, slow-cook beef tendons for 8 to 12 hours, simmered in broth with garlic, ginger, vinegar, and herbs. As they soften, they release their healing compounds into the liquid. You can enjoy them diced in noodle soups, stews, or rice bowls. If the texture is unfamiliar, start by blending small pieces with broth and vegetables until it becomes second nature. For seniors who feel their legs wobble, their joints grind, or their independence slipping, this is a food worth embracing. Not flashy, not trendy, but deeply biologically effective. In a world full of synthetic solutions, sometimes the most powerful medicine is the one we once turned away from. Beef tendons aren't just food. They're your body's blueprint for a stronger tomorrow. And now you know 7 collagen-rich foods that aren't just meals on a plate, but quiet healers working from within. They may look ordinary, but inside each one is a chance to reclaim something you thought was lost. The ease of movement, the confidence of standing tall, the simple joy of walking without pain. But this isn't just about food, it's about choice. The choice to say, I am not done yet. The choice to stop treating pain like an unchangeable fact of life. The choice to nourish your body, not with trends or fads, but with wisdom drawn from nature and time. Because your legs aren't just limbs, they're your foundation, your freedom, your legacy. They've carried you through decades of life, love, and lessons, and they deserve care, attention, and support. Whether you start with a spoonful of bone broth or a handful of pumpkin seeds, take that first step. Because healing doesn't begin with a miracle, it begins with intention, and right now you have it. If this video helped you in any way, leave a comment below. Tell us which food you'll start with this week. Share this with a loved one who needs it. And don't forget to subscribe for more honest, science-backed, and heart-led advice, right here on Daily Elder Advice. Together, we're not just aging, we're thriving, healing, and walking forward, one step at a time.